How stands your record? Have you been faithful to your trust? As you have seen your children inclined to follow a course that you knew would result in impurity of thought and word and act, have you first asked God for help, tried to show them their danger? Have you pointed out to them the peril of taking a path of their own choosing? Mothers, have you neglected your God-given work, the greatest work ever committed to mortals? Have you refused to bear your God-given responsibilities? In the time of trouble just before us, when the judgments of God fall upon the impure and unholy, will your children curse you because of your indulgence? Ma'am.
When it says that the mother is very important to rearing the child, I've been where if you say you're a housewife.
Can you say louder?
If you say you're a housewife, it's like you don't really amount to a whole lot. I mean, you had to have a higher education in order to be a parent. She's saying that to be a housewife has been disparaged in recent times. If you don't have some higher education, you're considered not worthy. Is that basically the summary? Yes. And that's a huge danger. The world wants more and more degrees, more and more time going to sit at the feet of the infidels to learn more and more of their human wisdom.
Society puts virtually no value on being a mother.
Right.
And I know even when I quit nursing to stay home with the children, even some of my own relatives felt like I was wasting my education by staying home with the children. But I have no regrets over that.
Amen. I found many statements, and I can't even organize them well enough to share all of them, and there are too many. But they're very positive statements that have been made, and Scriptures enjoins that we need to be diligent in that very thing. Mrs. White makes a statement that parents are to make this the most important thing.
Yes.
And that if they can't take time to study how to do this, what are they doing? And on and on. And so, to get back to this idea, say there's a wayward child, and we say, if I've trained him up in the way that he should go, when he's old, he won't depart from this way. So you can either say, 1, he will be fine, he'll come back, or 2, why hasn't he come back? Those are 2 ways that we can think about that. We can act in faith, we can act in presumption. Both of those might be presumptuous. The track of faith and presumption lie fairly close together, but eventually they diverge to opposite directions. But both claim the promises of God. But one, faith, claims the promises of God in obedience, and presumption claims the promises in disobedience. And so, if I do not do what God says, but I still expect His blessings, that's presumption. So, if I hypothetically, since I don't have children, tried to do what was right but failed, then I can't just come to God. Well, I can't anyway, but demanding. This is not the right attitude to come to God, demanding this result. It needs to be in humility. And I come to Him and say, I've wanted to do what's right. I have failed. I know I've failed, but I have done some of what's right. I pray for the blessing. I want that blessing. What can I do to redeem the time? You don't say, where's my reward? I did everything you said. Where's my reward? I really believe this is a bad attitude. Any thoughts on that? Maybe that's speculative. Go ahead.
I hate to bypass this, but this text to me has a condemnation aspect to it. And the word should, which you know very well, the word should is not in the original, because that is the word that condemns. Because if a parent sees a child go astray, it's a condemnation on them. You didn't do it right. You failed somehow. You didn't follow the instructions that I gave you because this kid has chosen the wrong way. We can't go there.
We can't say what's right. We can't give.
No, we can't go there and be condemned when a child goes astray.
We can't.
Train up a child in The actual literal translation, which it may come down to, is train, and also a child, when you look at the words in Hebrew, refer to an older young person, not necessarily a toddler.
I read those
Train an
comments.
adolescent in his way. You've given him talents. You've given him strengths. Train the child in his strengths and his talents, is what it seems to be really saying.
That's what the teacher's comments say. Yes, I looked it up, and in Strong's Concordance, the comments on those. Okay, in the King James, there are italics for supplied words that they admit they supply. That's not italicized. So I looked it up. It's true that there are not as many Hebrew words as there are English words. So you might have 3 words, and then you have a Strong's number. And you have 2 or 3 more in a Strong's number. So there's 1 Hebrew words translated into 2 or 3 words. But it requires that because there's not an exact equivalence between Hebrew and English. There might not be a word that means exactly that. It might take a phrase to mean the same thing. And so I don't know Hebrew, but I don't think most of us don't know Hebrew. So I went and looked, and in there, somewhere in the list, one of the definitions of this word that's represented by the Strong's number, I'd get confused even looking at the little squigglies. I don't know the Hebrew alphabet. The word should is in there. So I do not know for sure that this author is right in saying, oh, this is literally what it means. It looks to me like it's his alternate translation. He's basically saying, here's one translation that everyone uses. I think this one's more accurate. But it sounds to me like it's more his opinion, because when I looked up the old commentators, they use should. When I looked up Ellen White, she quotes it exactly as should and uses it that way. I have a stack of Ellen White statements where she quotes it exactly. One of them says, Solomon says. One of them says, the Word of God says. One of them says, this language is positive, and she goes on to expound upon it. Thy word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my path. That's a path, a way, a specific way. There's straight is the way and narrow is the gate that leads to life, and few there be that find it. Yes, we all have different purposes in life, and that element, I believe, you're right. We're different. I have different talents than the next fellow, and so we have different things, that we develop. But surely, as we're training, that training can't exclude the training in righteousness. You want to be trained.
It does not negate the parent's responsibility in any way. But it doesn't give them the onus of the reward that's negative.
The thing that we also add into this is the element of choice that the child has.
The element, yes. There are lots of wiggle discussions in there, and it's all true. We talked about that to start with. That, Satan rebelled in a perfect environment. Cain rebelled, and Abel didn't. Esau and Jacob, well, they both sinned. But, we have that, sure, absolutely, no doubt. But we're supposed to, this is a positive admonition to train the child in the way he should go. And not just the way he's going to go. That doesn't mean anything. If you just train him anyway, it doesn't matter. It must be the way.
Right.
Otherwise, what's the point? If we're not being trained in righteousness, who cares? What's the point of training? Maybe I'm missing something here. Comment? No. Okay. Yes, I understand.
Contradicting each other?
I think we both have the same solution, but the steps we're taking there maybe are. Does that make sense? Different? Is that possible?
Oh.
I think we both have the same end in mind, and Paul may be right. I may be wrong. He may know more about the Hebrew than I do. You're right. That's exactly the argument they present. They say, they say should isn't there. So direct him in the way he will go. Is the should? Are we seeing that it's? I'm sorry. I didn't want to step on your feet intentionally or unnecessarily. I could be wrong. When I read this, I felt like what it was an attempt to back off from the positive statement a little bit that said, this is what you need to do. And I feel like if that's the case, that's a mistake. Maybe that's not what you got out of the teacher's comments.
what I'm looking at is a parent
Uh-huh.
who does what they should,
Yeah.
who follows the instructions,
Yeah.
and the child does not turn out the way that they trained them.
Mm-hmm.
They should not be condemned by this text.
Well, if
If they are condemned by this text, they're missing something of the free will. Like 40 graduates here this weekend. You give them 10 years. They've been raised, they've been sacrificed for. We have an academy. We pour all the resources that we can into that life. And you look at them in 10 years, how many of them will have responded positively to that?
Yeah, not enough. But this is why it says not, how many is it? 6 and 20? What's the number? Do you remember? Are prepared to meet the Lord in the Adventist church right now. So if a small person, what is it? 1 in 10? I've seen different numbers. Say 1 in 10. We'll go with that number. Not 1 in 10 Adventists are prepared to meet the Lord. If I'm one of the 90% of Adventists that are not prepared for the Lord's coming, do you think I'm prepared to raise up a child in the way that he should go? If the way I'm going is to destruction and loss.
In that context, you and I, though neither one of us have children, there are children out here that are watching you and I, and we have just as much responsibility
As the parents.
as far as our part's concerned as that parent does.
Yeah, and a lot of these statements talk about teachers.
That parent is not any greater, I guess, the word I'm trying to look for,
Yeah.
than ours is, because I've been down that road myself. And I've said, well, so-and-so's not doing what they should be doing. Why should I have to be the only one?
Yeah. Well, I'm not trying to say that the text can be used to condemn the parents or the teachers or anything. What I'm saying is, as the parent or the teacher, whatever, as we're looking at our own hearts, I think it should give us pause to say, what should I have done? Did I, and to evaluate and consider.
Do that. But look at poor Eve. Who was any closer to God than Eve?
I know.
And look what happened to her child.
Well, and I'm not saying there's any guilt on her part. I'm not saying that I know that there's any guilt on any one part. All I'm saying that there is guilt on some parts, and we need to not gloss that over.
There are no perfect parents.
Right. And so what I'm saying is, if I have acted imperfectly as a parent, then to the degree that I have failed as a parent, to that degree I am responsible for a faulty education in that child, and to that degree that propensity to do evil is my fault. There's responsibility. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not saying there's not redemption. I'm not saying there's not forgiveness. But I'm saying to say I have no fault is a problem, because it takes the ideal from way up here and it brings it way down to my level.
I just wanted to say something that I thought I learned from this statement.
Yes, ma'am.
The way it should go. I understood that the way you should go, that we should go as a parent, is the way to God, the way to Jesus.
Right. Let me read this to you. This will be a little bit of context.